It is the current state of Myanmar and its policies that systematically target, kills, rapes, and propagates hate speech. So when are we going to address this root cause? When are we going to address the genocidal state of Myanmar? When all of the Rohingyas have been eliminated from the villages of Rakhine? When all the Kashan and the Shan villages have been burned out and the Karen women have been raped? We have 1 year since the massacre took place. We have more than 80% of Rohingyas that have been driven out of Myanmar, sent into mass graves, made orphans, gang raped, homeless, shelterless, while there are reports after reports and statements after statements calling it ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, now genocide, and despite all of that, the government of Myanmar continues to show utter defiance by sentencing the reporters to jail, with further statements from Suu Kyi's office saying that they defend the actions of the government. And despite all of this, I don't know what we are waiting for to address the root cause. I sincerely don't understand what we are waiting for to take concrete actions. Merci beaucoup.
Bonjour. Appuyant la lettre et les auteurs, la Commission internationale des juristes, section canadienne, encourage le Canada à intensifier ses efforts et ceux de la communauté internationale pour arrêter les crises humanitaires et les abus des droits de la personne auxquels sont confrontés les Rohingyas au Myanmar et au Bangladesh. Notre organisation et son siège social à Genève et ses partenaires dans le monde entier sont fondés sur la primauté du droit, l'indépendance du pouvoir judiciaire et les droits de la personne. Le Myanmar a commis certaines des violations et des valeurs des normes universelles les plus graves depuis la Seconde Guerre mondiale. Nous encourageons le Canada et la communauté internationale à veiller à ce que les protections juridiques internationales soient garanties et surveillées en ce qui concerne les Rohingyas qui restent ou reviennent au Bangladesh. On an ICJ Geneva mission to Myanmar in 2015, the president of ICJ Canada noted that one of the root causes of the genocidal acts we see today arose out of the virulent hate propaganda against the Rohingyas by extremist Buddhist leaders and encouraged violent attacks by monks and others against the Rohingyas and lack of any legal sanctions against these verbal and actual attacks. When the military joined on a massive scale, ICJ and Geneva urged the world to intervene to prevent it from evolving into the first genocidal act of the 21st century. We urge Canada and the international community to prevent the Myanmar military completing their genocidal goals. Merci.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kyle Matthews. I'm Executive Director of the Montreal Institute for Genocide and Human Rights Studies. There isn't much that I can say that my colleagues haven't said, but it's one thing to point out that I think that Canadian civil society stand united with the people, the Rohingya people, and demand more concrete action. In this letter, we recognize that Canada has shown leadership. It's probably been one of the best performing countries on the planet in defending the Rohingya and trying to get the ICC to get involved in pointing out and bringing about justice to those in the military. However, we have an additional responsibility. 13 years ago, Canada worked to get all the members of the UN together in New York to endorse the responsibility to protect, a notion that no country has a right to commit mass atrocity crimes against civilians on its territory. It's time we act on that. We can't simply just say that we're concerned about it and not take more action to where the killing is taking place. And in that note, I point out, once again, the IDPs, the internally displaced people in Rohingya, they haven't had any access by the UN or any outside observers. Clearly, this is where we have to put all our action and try to get to change the behavior of the Myanmar government. Second and last point, we have an additional responsibility. Aung San Suu Kyi is an honorary citizen of Canada. It is unacceptable that we have an honorary citizen who won the Nobel Peace Prize and went to take power and commit genocide against people on her territory. We have an additional responsibility. We should hold ourselves, and I ask the Prime Minister, please revoke our citizenship and invoke R2P. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McFadyen, for hosting us, and Rais for your courage in sharing the plight and pain of that underpins the genocide of the Rohingya people, and our responsibility as Canadians to combat this blight on our common humanity. We are meeting today on the 70th anniversary year of both the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the UN Genocide Convention, as John mentioned, which Myanmar and Canada are both signatories to. And in the first article, the Genocide Convention states that the contracting parties confirm that genocide is a crime under international law, which they undertake to prevent and to punish. We are here today because the international community has not fulfilled its contractual obligations in either regard. Over 6 years ago, and I know John referenced over 30 years of UN reporting, but 6 years ago, the Canadian Parliament, in this very same room, held a press conference where they released a report of the Subcommittee of International Human Rights sounding the alarm on the perpetration of crimes against the Rohingya in Myanmar, on mass domestic repression, and called for urgent international action. And what was the response? Silence, an inexplicable international indifference and inaction in the face of such horror and human suffering. 6 years later now, we are in the midst of an ongoing genocide against Rohingya, and there is still a need for action. Canada has exercised important leadership in that regard, with the appointment of Bob Rae as Special Envoy and Minister Freeland's visiting Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, speaking on behalf of the Rohingya at any given opportunity, whether at ASEAN, the G7, UN Human Rights Council. But however, Canada's announcement of targeted sanctions and humanitarian aid is commendable, but not commensurate with the gravity of the crimes. As Senator McPhaedron said, words do matter, and we support the call of Canada's Rohingya community and legal experts that Canada formally recognize that a genocide is taking place. But regardless of what it is called, the world needs to do more in solidarity with those suffering on the ground to address and redress the enormity of the plight and pain of the Rohingya people. So I'm, for the sake of time, I will move a bit further just to a couple of policy points. As per our R2P obligations that was referenced by Kyle, our responsibility to protect and to prevent, we must do more to combat as a country the ongoing genocide. Now, in 2007, Canada had instituted hard-hitting sanctions against Myanmar, which Canada admits had contributed at the time to the military junta's move towards greater openness and democratic reform, and therefore repealed most of these sanctions in 2012. So in light of a backsliding in every single one of these measures, and in particular the perpetration of genocide itself, Canada should consider reintroducing these sanctions and encourage its allies to do the same. Any easing of sanctions would be tied to clear steps and measurable progress regarding the situation of the Rohingya in northern Rakhine and creating the conditions for a safe, dignified and secure return for those forced into Bangladesh. As well, we echo the recent call that was made by Professor Irwin Kotler and others to revoke Canada's highest honour. That was awarded to Aung San Suu Kyi. She recently defended the unjust imprisonment of journalists and said that it was part of a due process. Well, that process was a sham, and Aung San Suu Kyi's actions are a shame, and it is a standing complicity for her to be part of the annals of Canada's highest honours. And we must be sure to not be honouring a collaborator in the genocide. And lastly, an important recommendation from Bob Rae's report was that Canada should immediately work on the international scenes to institute IIIM, an independent international mechanism that would immediately start compiling evidence towards the investigation and prosecutions of those responsible. So the UNGA is opening its first session tomorrow, and Canada should be leading in promoting a resolution establishing such a mechanism. And lastly, internationally, take this opportunity at the UNGA to be pushing for greater humanitarian aid, and again for a consolidation of sanctions and other mechanisms of pressure to tell those on the ground in Bangladesh, in northern Rakhine, that Canada stands with them. We will not relent until the repression ends, and tell those perpetrators that they cannot continue to act with impunity, that they cannot move on to against the Kachin and others with impunity, and that the world is watching, the world cares, and that they will be held accountable for their crimes.
Thank you so much. As you can see, there's a great deal of information and a great deal of concern with a great deal of passion. And for that, I do apologize to you for limited time for questions. But please, if you have any questions, feel welcome.
I have a question for Raees, actually. Michelle Zilio from the Globe and Mail. I was just saying, you were just saying earlier that you don't understand what the government is waiting for to take concrete actions. So what would it mean to, it is a small Rohingya community here in Canada, but what would it mean to your community to have the Prime Minister stand up, refer this to the ICJ and get the process moving?
Are you referring to ICJ to get a process moving by invoking the Genocide Convention? This is one of the actions that I would not speak only for myself. I would speak for my community that I have connected with 1 month staying at the refugee camps and interviewing. I was volunteering with the Shoah Foundation of the University of Southern California. We interviewed about 100 people from 15 different villages burned to the ground. They were all asking for justice. They were all asking for the state of Myanmar for reparations, we want our cattle back. We don't want to be living in this 5 by 5 meters little shed that blows out after a monsoon arrives or after something arrives. I don't have anything to eat. I got to wait in line we've eaten the best food, but we don't have any of that. What are we going to do okay, you will catch the generals, then what? But what are we going to do? Are we going to live all our lives here? So this is what is required. And I'm saying this on behalf of my people and not just myself.
Khan, if you could briefly just recap what it would mean, what would the symbolic, tangible, legal impact be of the Prime Minister pronouncing that this is a genocide?
Well, by declaring it a genocide, it starts to trip a number of switches. Declaring it a genocide means there are now legal obligations. There are actions that need to be taken legally, maybe militarily, because it's not just about, we've got 1 million refugees sitting in the largest refugee camp in the world in Bangladesh. And that's supposed to be a temporary thing. But there are some refugees who've been living in Bangladesh from previous atrocities, who've been there for 10, 15, 20 years. We've now got 1 million living there. How long is it going to take? Declaring it a genocide begins a process to hold the perpetrators of the crimes accountable. It also begins a process of trying to arrange for reparations for the people, because people have been killed, families have been destroyed, their livelihoods have been destroyed, their villages have been burned and bulldozed over, and the land given to others who are non-Rohingya. And these people, the vast majority of them, they're not looking to go and settle elsewhere in the world. They want to go back to the lives that they had in the land that they lived in for centuries. That's what they want. And naming it as a genocide and beginning that process means that you begin the process of allowing these people to hopefully eventually return to a place which they call home.
You're worried that we're going to look back on this in time and say, wow, did we ever make a mistake?
Well, Senator McFedrin referenced the fact that the Prime Minister is going to be making an apology for the MS St. Louis, which Canada turned away in the late 30s. Those 700 or odd number of Jews went back to Germany. A lot of them died in concentration camps. And putting up monuments and memorials to these atrocities does nothing to help these people. We're talking about human lives and human dignity and our basic humanity. And I firmly believe if we don't act when these sort of crimes take place, we lose a little bit of our humanity. We lose a bit of our Canadianness. And the proudest moment in the last 10 years for me as a Canadian was when the Prime Minister, after the election, allowed those 50,000 Syrian refugees into the country. I was so proud to be a Canadian at that point. I want to feel that pride again. Let Canada show that to the world, that we will not stay quiet when there are crimes being committed. In a city, if someone's going around mass murdering people and we know who it is, we've got the evidence, we're not going to say, oh, we can't do anything about it. We're going to call the police. We're going to undertake the legal actions to find that, try that criminal. This is the same thing, but on a much more massive scale, and it's the worst crime that can be committed in humanity, and it needs to be named and it needs to be acted upon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator, thank you so much.
I'm so sorry I had to press you one time.
I know we were going over time, so
I
appreciate that.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting us.